everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We have two great companies with us, VisionSpark and Kolbe. They both are industry experts on assessments, and we can't wait to see everything that we're going to learn from two of their leaders. So we have with us Alec Broadfoot, the CEO and visionary of VisionSpark, who's going to be talking to us about the TIP assessment, the Talent Impact Profile Assessment. And then we also have Amy with us from Kolbe. She is the president, and she's going to be talking to us about their Kolbe assessment, and we're going to see how this can help all of you with your hiring and with your existing employees. So we're excited. Thank you both for coming, and we're excited to have you both today and learn from you both, most importantly. So we're going to start off with some questions here. We're going to do this as an interview. Can you each give us both a quick overview of your assessment, what it measures, and why it really matters and is important? Amy, we can start with you.
Sure. Well, the Kolbe A Index, and that's kind of our flagship assessment, measures how you instinctively execute, make decisions, solve problems, basically take action. So it's this doing part of the mind, as you can see on your screen there, and it's more formally called the conative part of the mind. And it's interesting, the three parts of the mind is something that ancient philosophers wrote about, Aristotle, Plato. It has been around, but I think we've really been lacking in some comprehensive assessments to make sure that we're measuring each one. So we are exclusively this execution part of the mind.
Yes, and so the TIP assessment measures the other two parts of the mind, the thinking, the cognitive part, and the performing, which is affective. So most assessments that you see out there, DISC, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, Working Genius measure the affective. And so the TIP measures performance behaviors and personality, where the cognitive measures mental acuity, how quickly do you learn, your learning ability, detail orientation, communication ability, problem-solving ability, and critical thinking ability.
Okay, awesome. So it sounds like between the two assessments, we can get really the full mind of the person that we're going to be looking at or considering for a seat. So Alec, why is mental acuity so important to measure?
Yeah, so in this day and age, as companies are hiring, you have a lot of individuals that are moving from company to company. Their stints are not as long. And so when you're looking at mental acuity, if someone has a lower mental acuity, like we have this fictitious person here named Chaos, and so Kay's mental acuity, her learning style is more of a hands-on learner. So she would be great if she did the same job as her experience. So if she was in a role for 20 years and that never changed, she would continue to do well at it as long as it didn't require any additional challenges or any new insights. Where in today's day and age, there's a lot of moving pieces. We saw this really happen during COVID, where companies needed to pivot. And so the companies that had leadership teams with higher mental acuity were much more successful. So those companies could problem solve, have strategic thinking ability, critical thinking ability. And so those companies were, they prospered, as well as the leaders who have those stronger mental acuities tend to be better leaders from a cognitive portion.
Okay, great. And Amy, why would you say it's important to understand how a team member, their MO is, like their mode of operation? Why is that important?
Sure. Well, leaders come to us all the time and say, we need people to be doing more. And our goal is to make sure that we are getting high performance with people, but that you're able to sustain that. So what we've discovered in all of our years of working with clients and research is that getting things done and being able to sustain these high levels of performance requires people to kind of be in the zone. Think of something that you could just do all day, where time flies by, it just comes naturally to you. The more that we can make sure we identify what kinds of tasks and ways that people get things done, how that is specific to an individual, and then put them in roles where they're able to do that, that's when people don't burn out. They don't turn over. You have a much better chance of keeping someone, but also get them performing at high levels where they love their job. So it is this formula where the more we raise awareness, and then people start to learn to manage their mental energy. In other words, make good decisions about how you're getting things done every day. Minimize the amount of time you're working against your natural instincts, but we all know that that's a little pie in the sky. We are going to have to sometimes work against our grain. But what you do is learn to surround yourself with the people who bring some diverse effort to that. And so, an example here, this is what a Kolbe index looks like. You can see my Kolbe and Alex. It's so strange how similar we are. It's not only important for us to each know our own strengths in executing, but the other people. So we're great when we have to brainstorm ideas, come up with innovative ways of doing things. And there are times when I need someone who's a clone of me to work with me. Alex, a great partner for that. But both of us need someone who is going to manage the calendar, do the details, like really put some processes in place as well. And so we have to know each other's strengths and know when do you need a clone and when do you need a complement of each other. And teams, we go in and we assess team makeups and see to what degree do you have diversity and to what degree do you have a bunch of people who are exactly the same, and then help that team more effectively work together.
Love that.
And when I took the Colby, I was really insightful. I learned some things like I would volunteer, whether it was at church or on nonprofits or sit on boards, and it would be like, who wants to do this job? And I'd be like, I'll do it. Or, and I volunteer, and then afterwards I dread it because I have to come up with lots of details and all of that. So the Colby was really instrumental for me to learn that particular trait, why I volunteer and I say yes when I regret it later.
Yeah, that's a good point. And let me just add to that, Alec. What I love about the tip is that we're measuring what you would do if free to be yourself, most naturally. We're not saying what are people capable of. So what I love is looking at the capabilities and some of what you're saying about mental acuity and those kinds of things with then what do you do most naturally too? Because, Alec is certainly capable of doing all the details and the organization as well. But knowing what he's capable of and what he does most naturally together is really key.
Yeah, that's really great. Kind of brings us to our next question. There's often a lot of confusion around personality, behavior, and instinct. So how would you both explain the difference, where your assessment fits in?
The simplest way is what we had on the other slide is kind of the thinking, feeling, doing, right? I think that people misunderstand that if you are motivated or value getting things done in a certain way, that means you're always going to execute that way. What motivation is really critical for is what do you care enough about and what are you driven to do enough to take action on? And then we're adding in kind of the how. But looking at just one isolated piece is not as effective as a more comprehensive view. So Alec, you can add in because what TIP does really well is a much more comprehensive view of that.
Yeah, we can get into it more when we look at the different components of the tip, but really with the thinking and the performing aspect, you can really determine someone if they're going to be successful in that role. So if someone has a high mental acuity and they're really organized, we know that we can predict their success when the performance factors are real there. So, or if someone has like an average level mental acuity, which is not bad at all, and they're really organized, they would definitely succeed in an EA role or management role or something like that.
Okay, very good. So what insight do your tools provide on a leader that you might not get from the other assessment? Where are the differences, would you say?
I'll let you take that, Alex.
That's a really good question. And because we work with clients that use the Colby, we have been trying to draw correlations between the two, and there's nothing definitive. So we know that they measure very different things. So at VisionSpark, for example, we have indispensable traits of leaders that we place, and we want to make sure that these leaders have certain components on the tip. So they have to have a good mental acuity, strong communication skills. We want them to be more organized, more process oriented, more empathetic, that they love coaching and holding people accountable. And so those are the traits that we look for on the tip. And so, that is how we use the tip. Where the Kolbe, and Amy, I want you to speak to this, but it measures someone's, could be high follow through or their fact finding or, quick start implementing. So that's where that comes into play, where one by itself is good, but two together is better.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just add, yeah, the four things we're looking at are so uniquely different from TIP. We're looking at how do you handle data and information? What do you do with organization? How do you handle innovation and change? And then ultimately, what do you do with the three-dimensional world? So when Alex says something like, to what degree do you have empathy? That's huge. I mean, that is something that we don't measure, which is an overlay on top of how will you naturally solve problems that gives you a much more complete view. Like you're saying, I want a leader that has the mental acuity, but also some of these pieces of emotional intelligence that are key as well.
Yeah, very good. Then how do both of your assessments address the challenge of candidates maybe trying to game the system or present themselves in a light that they just, it's not really them, who they are?
Yeah, so on Colby, we have a scale of 1 to 10 of an assessment, and here's what's really helpful. There are no good or bad results on Colby. And so the way that the assessment is written, it is scored in such a way where it's a forced choice question. You have to pick a most and you have to pick a least, which means you can't be a 10, 10, 10, 10 on everything, or the opposite of that, right? And so it has a built-in mechanism that if someone is really contradicting themselves over and over again, it will throw a message showing you that they had really contradictory answers. So a well-designed assessment already has built-in characteristics that's going to catch someone trying to game the system. Whereas if you're just sitting in an interview, I'm going to, assume or guess something about this role, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you want to hear is what I'm going to do. That's very hard to do when you're filling out the Kolbe Index and be consistent. So that's kind of what we have going on so that you will get an indication of that.
Great. And then how about the assessment, Alec?
Yeah, so we have a validity scale. So this measures someone's if they're going to distort in their assessment. So there's actually questions in the assessment that will be measuring if someone's trying to game the system, trying to portray someone who they're not. So if you go to the other candidate, I think it's slide 11, Jen. This is Kay's assessment, a few down here, but Kay really distorted. So she did not want us to know who she really was. And she's someone that may tell you, like, you want to hear it. She may portray herself as being calmer than she is or having a lower sense of urgency. So we will look at this particular candidate in a light like, are these results really accurate? Is she trying to tell us who she's really not? And so it really comes into play. And this score is every day as we lean on AI and we're in this new age, this is so important for our candidates as when we place with clients to make sure that they're not distorting.
Okay, very good. So how does looking at different dimensions of human performance, aptitude, behavior, instinct create a fuller understanding than just maybe focusing on one of those things? What have you both found?
I mean, we've gone over kind of these three dimensions of the mind, so maybe part of this is obvious where if you know there's a whole person, we need to have an understanding of what people are bringing to the table in all three. I mean, that's just really critical. We need people who have the capability and the skills to do it, and the aptitude to do it. We need to understand how they're going to perform and what the affective behaviors and values that we're going to see driving performance. And then we need people who are going to make decisions and solve problems with what we need. So obviously all three of those are critical, but here's what happens in the interview process. We absolutely just fall in love with a candidate. That's the other thing that happens, right? So we need the most objective measures possible that are hidden hitting all three of these so that we can get this picture of who the candidate really is, not just what they're going to tell us. And by the way, it's just human nature that if I ask you a question and say, hey, how would you handle this situation? And put you in a good behavioral interviewing situation, I'm going to be attracted to you saying exactly the same way that I would do it, right? So one of the things that looking at all three parts of the mind, it's more comprehensive and it's just more objective. We want to get this objective view so that we can take ourselves that have our own internal biases, whether you want to admit it or not. We want to take our human selves out of it as much as we can. So what would you add to that, Alec?
Yeah, I mean that is so good, Amy. That's so true. There's a book called "It's Not the How, but it's the Who," and the author he says a typical interview is a conversation between two liars. And so you have the company lying like how great it's here to work. You have the candidate lying how great they are, and
Yeah.
then you end up hiring someone, and you're like, that's not the person I interviewed, and the company's like that's or the candidate's like this is not the boss I interviewed with. So.
Right.
So yeah, you definitely need objective measurements. There was a study done about 20 years ago that said an interview, not a VisionSpark interview, for those of you that have been through that, but an interview by itself in terms of predicting someone's success is only about 14% effective. Where if you add a high quality assessment, it more than triples those odds to about 52% effective, right? So, and Amy and I wrote an article about this on LinkedIn about how important it is to include assessments and really good behavioral interviewing.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'll say that I really love about Tip is your interview questions are exceptional. So I'm not sure if, we've gotten to that part of the conversation, but I love the fact that you guys have, that you're helping with that because everybody needs that. Like everyone needs, what am I really asking this person to get at what I need in addition to the assessment, right?
Yeah, our clients do like that. I mean, it kind of makes them look like a professional interviewer, or they have some insight on someone, and you see someone that is likely to procrastinate, and you have interview questions that you're asking the candidate in what areas they procrastinate, and it kind of puts the candidate on edge a little bit, like, how do they know I procrastinate a lot? So it's a really cool feature of the assessment.
That's awesome. How would both of you say that your assessments help with getting the right people in the right seats? That seems to be something we hear a lot about now. Companies are looking to get the right people in the right seats. How do your assessments support that goal?
And maybe you can jump to this slide as far as the process. But at Kolbe, we have a process that makes sure that we follow all the EEOC guidelines for hiring. So just the one thing I would say to everyone out there is please know that using an assessment and hiring is not recommended if you don't go through a specific process to make sure that you establish job relatedness. That is what kind of the legal term. Those of you in Canada and aren't in the US, you have a very similar law. So we go through a process to make sure we're getting the right people in the right seats by first just defining the job requirements. That's what establishing job relatedness is. We have a separate assessment that the leader or anyone in a position to evaluate the role completes. It's pretty straightforward and simple, but it's basically what kinds of behaviors, what do you need this person to do to execute and solve problems in a way that's going to match the requirements of the job? Once we have that, we kind of match that with the leader's strengths and how they do things, and we put together a range of numbers or a range of success, which is kind of your profile of an ideal candidate. And from there, once we've got that job profile assessed, then you can screen candidates against that, and we rank them kind of A through F letter grade. But what it's doing is it's forcing you up front to say, I'm not just going to guess at what I want, but I'm going to have to sit down and do a forced choice assessment to say, here's what I need done. Now, let me just add one other thing. If you already have high performers in a role, then we can add that. So if we already, let's say you're hiring for a sales position, you give us your top performing salespeople, we can assess their strengths, put that into this, and now we have a really good picture of what success looks like in the role. So that at least you're going through a process of getting the right people in the right seats is first defining that seat more effectively.
Yeah. How about you, Alec?
Yeah, it's similar in the fact that there's a variety of different ways, but on our assessment, you see the blue scores on the screen there. Those scores are success factors for this particular role. So this is for a number two leader in a company, and so we want to see scores in those benchmarks, so we can see that this particular candidate, Miles, is going to have a much higher predictability because his scores are in the brackets where if you looked at K scores, chaos, her scores are way outside the bracket. And so, Kay had a really good resume, good references, but we see here that she's going to be, she's not going to have the traits necessary. Like she's going to be way too impatient. She's not going to be following a process. She's disorganized. And so we know that K is not succeed. So the way these benchmarks are developed is that we have about 5 million different assessments in which we've come up with accurate benchmarks. And then what we do as well as we work with clients, just like what Amy mentioned about the Kolbe, is that if we know that there are certain rock stars on the team, superstars, we can actually see where they're really strong, and then we update the benchmarks for this particular client. So every company is different, the culture is different. Where I saw this play out really well is we had a client. They were engineers for the big three automakers, and they literally would live in a mobile home outside the plant, and they would work super long days, 16-hour days. And so we made sure that the benchmark under where it shows audience sensitivity, that those benchmarks were in that 7, 8, 9, that they had that resilient mental and physical toughness about them. And so we eliminated candidates for a client that they were in that 2, 3, 4, 5 space. They would not have withstood those conditions. I know I couldn't do it. So it's a really good assessment for that.
That's good. And let me just, there was a question that went into the Q&A related, I think, to what I said. So I'll just address it. Is the Kolbe assessment good for all positions? And maybe I said this when I gave a sales example or only for leaders. It's good for all positions, any entry level. So any position that you have, it can be used in hiring. The sweet spot is if you have a replicated position where there are high performers. And I assume that's the same too for you, Alec, because we can really get a sense of what's already working versus just one person's opinion of what's going to work. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's any position.
Great. And that's the same with yours, Alec, right?
Yeah, it works for any position, whether it's the CEO of a large company, directors, leaders, middle managers, and even line employees. I talked about that audience sensitivity. We've had clients that have reduced their turnover by not hiring people that were more on the sensitive side because they would be more likely to call in sick.
Interesting. Yes.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm. So now we've talked about these assessments in hiring process, but how can listeners and the people that are on the webinar today, how can they use these assessments for maybe onboarding or role clarity or even the long-term development of an employee?
Mm-hmm. Certainly role clarity, we have very specific tools to make sure that you're clear with understanding kind of what a leader is expecting on how you get things done. And the good news is we're hoping you can be yourself. Like if we're hiring well, it means we hired you because we want you to be exactly who you are. But we also have a job profile index that at 90 days we have people do where you say, here's how I feel I need to take action in order to be successful on this job. And we can compare that to how you naturally do things and predict a little bit of stress. Onboarding, we have a great tool that compares two people together. So the leader and the person in the role get what's called an A to A comparison, and it just gives you great tips for working with this person. And ultimately, we have team solutions as well. So we have team reports for a group that's truly solving problems together and getting things done together to understand where do they have gaps, where do they have a lot of the same kind of strength, and how do those dynamics play out.
And it's the same for us. This assessment does a really good job of answering, should I hire this person? Do I have the right person in the right seat? And identifying areas of potential training and development. And so if you look at, maybe that a certain individual has some areas of shortcoming, it actually identifies where they can receive further training. It's also really effective, like when we place an integrator or a leader for a client, we'll actually do what we call a side-by-side. And as we take that hiring manager, that leader's assessment results, and we take the new hires results and we meet with both of them, and we go over their assessments and how they'll interact with each other, what communication's like, where maybe there is going to be some issues. A short example here is I had a good friend who she was in my Vistage group, and she hired small companies. She hired, I think there's only 2 or 3 in her company at the time, but she hired like a right-hand person, and I had known this right-hand person already. They had taken our tip assessment, and I had my friend's results. And I'm like, oh no, what did you do? And she's like, well, Alec, what's your concern? And so, Jen, if you go to the one slide that shows the personality dimensions, they both scored really high in the area of assertiveness. And so they both were in that 8 or 9 assertiveness, where they were, my way or the highway. And so what do you think is going to happen when you have 2 strong personalities working super closely together? And she was still confident it was going to work out. And about 60 days, she's like, Alec, you were absolutely right. She always wanted to get her way, and it just didn't work out.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, Amy? With your assessment, how does that help with the things that Alex brought up, like conflict and team misalignment?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit about the A to A comparison, where you get some good, really as early on as possible, anticipate where you might have some issues. I have to tell you, it's been really interesting for, I own a business and run a business with my stepbrother. I mean, talk about potential for conflict personality ways, right? And so we focus a lot on what are our strengths and when do we need to stay in our lane. And so it's been really helpful because we just have these unique strengths. Sometimes they're the same, mostly they're different, and we can value those differences. So I do think the awareness of understanding how we need both of us and both of our approaches, but when to step up and when to take a back seat. There's times I say, that's David's strength, like go for it, versus when I will step up and say, this is my sweet spot. So just knowing that is huge, and understanding where you get slowed down. Now, in a team setting, understanding when people have some differences, that when you solve problems, it's not always pretty, but like understanding how everyone needs to play a role. When you see that kind of conflict that's actually productive, you get to see the difference between productive conflict and when it's really destructive. So we kind of help with that too, is the differences are actually really helpful, but only if you value them and everyone's getting to use their strengths. So we've got some really good reports to help you anticipate that.
Nice. Very good. So do both of you recommend your assessments as a good way to get, departments, team members, all taking them together and looking at the results side by side to help?
Oh, yeah. And having a conversation, right? Just being able to sit down. And, for anyone listening, just quick little activities are really important. Like, here's just a bonus activity to do at your next team meeting, maybe, is just kind of a 1 tip for working with me. So once you understand some of what you're bringing to the table, go 1 step further and get everyone to say, here's what I need in a work relationship, or this is when I do my best work. Here's my sweet spot. And share that and say, here's what I need. Those are little things that make a huge difference. What would you add to that, Alec?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good. At VisionSpark, we probably twice a year we'll learn a different assessment, just so we can stay well-rounded and be more self-aware. I think that's absolutely a really good advice, Amy. And I think also, I heard from your team is you don't want to use your MO as an excuse too, right? So sorry, I keep interrupting. I'm a quick start. It's not something that you want to lean on, because you still impact others. So yeah, absolutely. And the same is true for our assessment too. Knowing if someone's super process oriented, they're super organized, they really want to plan. Those things really help with team dynamics.
Awesome. A question for you, Alec. With resumes and even interviews becoming less reliable, as far as being able to predict someone's behavior, why is it important to use a validated assessment when hiring today?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this earlier, but the Kolbe has the ways to validate someone, and we do too. And so, I think AI is increasingly becoming a relied on resource where, an individual may go in and say, here's the job description. How should I take the tip, or how should I take the Kolbe? And fortunately, we have methods in place where we can know if someone is doing that, where I've heard of other assessments where they don't have that in place, and candidates are actually able to succeed and get the job because they're using AI. So it's really important to have a validated assessment. It's also important in hiring to make sure it's a validated assessment. And there are some of these really quick assessments, they take 3 and 5 minutes, and individuals think, hey, this is the end all be all assessment. The credibility of that assessment is really limited on just how short of a time it takes, how it takes for someone to take the assessment. So, it's super important to take a validated assessment.
Awesome. Well, to wrap up, what's one piece of advice that you would both give leaders who want to make better people decisions and build healthier teams within their companies?
Okay. I mean, I think I would just say, since we're talking about hiring, like, take the guesswork out of hiring. We all know how perfectly painful this is, and it is a whole process. So I sometimes I talk to people about using assessments, and I feel like, wow, this sounds like a lot of work. So maybe if what Alex and I have said is like, gosh, giving a couple different assessments, that seems like a lot. But we all know it is so expensive to deal with turnover. So it's not just the whole hiring process, but it's the onboarding and training them, and then losing someone. So it is worth it to spend the time, invest it up front, to really figure out objectively what you have going in and make a great decision. And just take the guesswork out of it. Like, this is what we're really stressing, if nothing else, is that using assessments well actually takes the guesswork out. It helps everyone understand too what you're bringing on board, so that we can speed up the process even when we're onboarding them, and just making sure you get someone in that sweet spot so that they love their job. Like, that's what we want to do. We don't want to just keep trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It's not good for you. It's not good for them. So if you really care about a candidate, we want to make sure that they can thrive too.
Yeah, and I wholly concur with that. The cost of a mishire is at minimum 3 times the person's salary. If you are talking leadership level positions, the cost is 14 times their annual salary. It's almost 300 hours of wasted time. So definitely an assessment is a drop in a bucket from a cost standpoint, and you're going to get your money back tenfold because you're going to get more productivity out of that employee. The piece of advice that I would love to share with clients, and Jen, if you can put the slide up of the mental acuity, mental aptitude slide. I am learning the more and more as I work with clients, we delve deep into their teams, is that so many, the previous one is perfect, the mental aptitudes, that so many individuals are tolerant of leaders who do not have strong leadership traits. And so, John Maxwell talks about the law of the lid, or the leadership lid. And so if you have if you're on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're 9, you're going to be able to lead teams really well, and you'll be able to develop others. But if your leader is a 5, no one in that department is going to be able to succeed beyond that leader's ability. So this is where I think companies really have an advantage if they are measuring mental aptitudes. So mental acuity, again, is problem solving, your learning ability, Business terms is your degree of financial and management exposure. This impacts your communication ability. So if you have leadership teams and you have individuals that have really high business terms and individuals that have low business terms, you're going to really struggle with communication. Marketplace awareness, this is really important. This is measure someone's memory retention, and it also will convey if someone is going to stay up to date with competitive trends and market trends. And so if you have leaders that are up to date on things, they're going to excel much greater than individuals that are not. Vocabulary is their command of the English language. This again measures their communication ability. Numerical accuracy, this is so important. This is their attention to detail and their ability to work with numbers. We were brought in to evaluate 3 controllers for a company here in Columbus. These candidates all had very low numerical accuracy. We told our client not to hire any of them. They didn't listen. They hired one. 6 months later, they said, Alec, we should have listened to you. It cost us $500,000. So these are so important to have these traits. And so I would highly recommend that if you are working with leaders and leadership teams, that you do have their mental aptitudes measured, and that really can help with the success of that organization.
And let me just add something, because when we did this with our team members, I cannot tell you how accurate this part was. Like even down to business terms and some of these things, this was very, very helpful and useful in understanding where some gaps were as well. And we were doing it, and I'm describing when we did it with leaders. So I cannot say enough about how useful this was.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amy. We've had also nothing but great success with our team in the Kolbe and even at Strategic Coach, just working with the other visionaries and seeing our different MOs. It's just it's so clear as to who we are. So and feel free to ask questions in the chat if you haven't already.
Yes, we have time for questions, right?
Yes, absolutely. Throw those in the chat. While people are doing that, just wanted to let people know as well that you both are authors. So you both have books available if people want to learn more. Amy's book, Do More Naturally. So a great read. And then Alex, Hiring Your Right Number 2 Leader. So that definitely will give you more information on the assessments and how they work for hiring and getting your team members, the right people in the right seats. Let me just see if we have any other questions coming in. Not just yet, but also wanted to mention a very generous offer that you both have made for all of our listeners today. So if you are thinking, oh, I know there's somebody on my team that could really use this assessment, or I need the information on somebody on my team to help understand if they're the right person for the right seat, or maybe you have a really important hire coming up, you can get a complimentary one of each assessment. So Alex offering the tip assessment. You'll want to email get a tip to discover@vision-spark.com. And then Amy's also offering a complimentary Kolbe A Index assessment. Just email info@kolbe.com. So thank you both so much for doing that for all of the listeners today. I'm sure people are going to want to take advantage of that free offer to help better understand the assessment and how it can help their team or anybody new that they're bringing onto the team.
Yeah, and let me just say, if you've ever taken a Kolbe index, or if you maybe aren't as interested for yourself, get the free index for someone else in your life, even if it's like your adult kid or someone you have a relationship with, but it's certainly at work too. So, okay, looks like more questions.
Some questions coming through.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the one question is, does the tip assessment complement the Kolbe assessment, or are they independent from one another? They are independent, but they do complement.
Yeah, totally measuring different parts of the mind. But if you want to look at the whole person, as we kept saying, thinking, feeling, and doing, both of them complement each other very well on that. Measure two totally different things.
Yeah, our next question is, can the tip assessment be purchased separately like the Kolbe? So people do know that we use the tip assessment in our executive searches that we do for companies, but Alec, you want to give insight into how they can also get the assessment for internal hiring?
Yeah, so you can purchase one of them, or you can purchase them in quantities, 5, 10, 15. There's no There's no limit in terms of the time frame, and so yeah, they can be purchased individually. You don't need a license. I know some of these other assessment companies where you need to purchase a whole bunch in the beginning of the year. This you can just do one at a time. So yeah.
Okay, great.
We're getting some more questions in, guys.
Okay, very good. How does your headspace at the time of taking the test affect the scores? That's an interesting question.
That's a great question. Okay. And I'm curious to see what you're going to say to that,
Yeah.
Alex. So I'll just answer it first. Um, the way that the Kolbe Index is framed, it asks you, if free to be yourself, I would. And then the choices are all executing, taking action kinds of things. And we're putting you in different scenarios. And it is asking you the different things over and over, forwards and backwards, upside down. Some of the questions don't even count in order to see a pattern of how you answered. So sometimes people will say, well, if I took it at home or if I took it at work, would it be different? It's really not, because it's asking yourself to put yourself in scenarios like, when completing a project, I would most likely do this. And it is written in such a way that it's going to catch any inconsistencies. And the only total exception I can see to that is there have been times when people have had, some traumatic brain injury or something like that, where if there's been true trauma to the brain, I'm not sure how that's affecting your result. But in general, it does not matter what kind of headspace that you're in. What would you say to that, Alec?
Yeah, it does matter for the tip. So because the mental aptitude sections are timed, you want to be free of interruptions. You want to make sure you're fresh. One of my friends, he's a contractor. He literally took it at 2 a.m. and was not happy with the results. And we were going back and forth. I said, "Why don't you take this?" He's like, 2 a.m. I'm like, "Oh, that's going to make a huge difference." I mean, you were not fresh and
Yeah.
thinking well. So, and also if you're under tons of stress, like most of us have stress, but if you have unusual amount of stress, that's going to impact it.
Okay, great. Someone wants to know, can you be trained to administer both of these assessments? Great question.
Yeah, so we have, first of all, you can just take it directly. You can go to Kolbe.com and take it, or start. Those of you who want to use this in your business, we have a free business account that you can open where you've got it in a database. So that's a separate way of doing it. But if you want to be trained and be an expert in this, whether you're an external consultant and you want to use this with clients and consult with it, or you're internal in an organization and you want to be an expert internally, we have a 3-day Kolbe certification training. It's actually 3 days in person, 4 days if you want to do it remote online through webinar process. So you can be trained on really becoming an expert in all the applications. So not just how to administer and understand and interpret the result, how to use it in teams, how to use it in hiring and one-on-one coaching.
Yeah, similar here for the tip. Yes, you can be trained in how to work with your clients and how to deliver results. And we kind of have like a walk, crawl, run type format. So there's parts where we can administer, and then if you're more comfortable, we can turn that over to you. And so yeah, yes, we do have that in place.
Great. Chris wants to know, do they send just the top 2 or 3 candidates to take the tip assessment or the Kolbe assessment, or do you recommend where do you recommend bringing the tool in during a hiring process?
Yeah, so if you're at like middle manager positions and up, I would recommend doing the top 2 or 3 candidates take the tip assessment. So do your interviews, see if they're a cultural fit, and then have the top 2 or 3 take the tip. It works out well. If you are thinking about, hey, I really want to incorporate this with my entry-level employees and I want to tie it to my applicant tracking system, that's definitely a possibility. We've done that with clients, and then that way you administer it before you enter the interview process. So it really depends on quantity. Majority of our clients have their top 2 or 3 candidates taken.
Awesome. How about you, Amy? What are your recommendations for Kolbe on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is flexible on when you do it. Certainly if you're hiring, just kind of like what Alex said, if you're hiring for this position where you have mass amounts of candidates that are applying, we think it really helps screen it down to the kinds of people that then you're going to spend more time interviewing with. So you can certainly do it with as more of a screening tool down, or at the very end for your top 2 or 3 candidates. But most of our clients tend to do it before the interviews even take place. They'll do a phone screen maybe, but not the expensive interviews with the in-person and all of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And then Jason wants to know, can you test your core values, a candidate against your core values using the
Yeah,
tip assessment?
against your company core values. Jen, if you can go to one of the slides that shows the personality traits. And so it's not like if your core value is, do whatever it takes. You can make some insights and deductions. Like for example, this particular candidate is has a good work ethic. They're fairly sensitive to what the needs are in the organization. They're highly motivated. They're ambitious. And so you could make those correlations, right? If you have like integrity is super important, honesty. If you see someone that has a high distortion score and a low process orientation score where they're really creative, you really want to interview them really well because they may not have that highest level of integrity. So you can make deductions, and we do work with clients to determine if someone's going to be a core value fit, but it's not overt, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Very good. Let's see if there's any other questions here. I think that's it. Just wanted to thank you both for being here today, for educating us on the assessments that can be used to really understand the full person's mind, either before you're hiring them or if you've already hired them, to see where they would be best fit within your organization. And also, thank you so much for your free offers. Hopefully, our audience is able to benefit from either a free tip assessment and or a free Kolbe assessment. So make sure to take a screenshot of this before we log off here, and appreciate you both guiding us through assessments and how our listeners can use them to grow and scale their businesses.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for participating in all your questions. Let us know how else we can help. And thank you, Alec.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. This is great, and better hiring for everybody.
Yes.
Yes, great.
Wish in 2026. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.